So I always try to pick brains of manufacturers where they value reps, but they understand like what makes it a successful partnership.
So it's kind of interesting because I actually started as a manufacturer's rep. So I owned a rep agency up until I started nationwide. So from 2005 until January of 22, I was full time with a manufacturer's rep business. So part of the interesting component to this is that I can feel both sides now. So I understand what it's like, especially when you ask the question about what does it take to really have the relationship, and it's communication. The problem is that most manufacturers want communication via a report. And I disagree with reports. Reports can be a lot of people, good, bad, or indifferent. A lot of times what ends up happening with the report is they're kind of funny reports, right? You got 20 calls that you have to make for a manufacturer. You get to the end of the month, you've got 19. All of a sudden there's 20. So it's one of those things where I think a lot of times the reports are just something to appease a management team.
When you say reports, you talking about like an activity call report?
Yeah. So from our perspective, I believe that if a manufacturer provides a product, and when I say product, I'm not talking about just the physical product that we provide, because if there's a need, you've got that part of it. I'm talking about the overall product, the technical expertise, the customer service component to it. If you're giving your manufacturer's reps the complete package, the manufacturer's reps come back and they want to do business with them. So it's almost the vice versa of what I think a lot of times manufacturers are trying to accomplish. I had one of my very first rep agencies that I brought on. He came to me and he's like, listen, I don't travel with manufacturers. And I'm like, that's fine. As long as we're communicating, I don't need to travel with you. I traveled with him over the last 16 months, 13 times. So this is a guy who told me I don't want to travel with manufacturers. So to me, that is what tells you whether or not you're doing something right or not from a manufacturer's perspective. If the reps want you to come in and they're driving that business and they're driving you to come make calls with them, and if they're driving your product, and if you're giving them, again, the intangibles, not the physical product, but the intangibles that come along with it, I think it's a recipe for success. And that's coming from an old manufacturer's rep. If I look at the successes that I had with the manufacturers and I look at the failures that I had with manufacturers, those are the recipes that we kind of gravitated to. We gravitated to the ones that really wanted to truly help us grow our business.
I agree with you. We've got a few lines that maybe are out of our top 10 from a revenue standpoint. We love selling it because it's a great product. If there's an issue, and they jump all over it, they take care of it. They take care of the customer. We get paid on time and they're great folks to deal with. I mean, we have a great rapport, great partnership. And to me, some manufacturers look at it as, well, I want to be number one on your line card. Well, it's not about that all the time. I mean, to me, it's more about that relationship, but also beyond the product, like you're talking about, the easy button. Like it's just easy to do business with you from a rep's perspective and a customer's perspective. And if you have that recipe, I think that's the winning combination, in my opinion. I mean, look, we all got to make money. We got to pay the light bill, right? But at the same time, if you can make it easy on everybody, the reps are going to push it each and every day. I can promise you that, just from a rep perspective.
I completely agree. I was at a distributor yesterday in Virginia, and one of the questions that I try to pose when we're making sales calls is, how do we become your emotional favorite, right? And whether you're a customer distributor relationship or whether you're a manufacturer's rep, manufacturer's relationship, it's how do we become your emotional favorite? How do we become that customer or company that not because of numbers or anything else, but you gradually, organically grow to be one of those top 5 favorites and you garner that emotional favorite. I think that's the fun part, right? I mean, that's what we're all trying to achieve, is we're still in a relational business.
Yeah, no, agreed.
What would you say you guys do to foster that? You mentioned a recipe, right, that you guys maybe follow to have a really good relationship with your reps. How would you, if there's other manufacturers kind of wondering, what's the secret sauce? How do I actually do this? What would you say?
I say the number one thing is communication, and that's communication from the top down, whether it's from ownership, whether it's from management. And when I say communication, I'm talking about the bad communication, right? Most people want, in a manufacturer's world, you want to talk about all the good stuff. We just had a conversation this morning about, when you're communicating about the bad things, we did something wrong. We're all human, right? And the more interaction that you can have from a human perspective, I think the better off you are. And if you drill it down to that level, I think that's the key. I always liken it, and especially with customer service people, I use this analogy all the time. If you've got a car that you took in and your car is supposed to be done on a Wednesday, and you show up on Wednesday and they say, oops, sorry, it's not going to be until the following Wednesday. And you've already got all of your stuff based upon you getting your car back on Wednesday. As a manufacturer, that's what we're doing every day. And when you let a customer down, it's not about letting them down and saying, hey, on Tuesday, we had a hiccup. We had this issue. We had this challenge. Can you pivot? Is this okay? It's having that conversation, not on Thursday when the product is supposed to show up and the product doesn't show up and the customer's calling and saying, where's my stuff? That's, to me, the secret sauce. It's that communication of being able to have the conversation preemptively on the good and the bad. If you have a problem, if you have a manufacturing issue, a lot of our stuff is handwork. And if you're having those conversations about challenges on the front end of something, I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a much better scenario for everybody. And again, those are the kind of things that elevate you to that emotional favorite.
Yeah. And I think too, I think it goes both ways too. I mean, challenging. A lot of times we're in these sales meetings and the manufacturers are like, hey, what do we need to do better? Where are your pitfalls? Where are the gaps in what we do? But at the same time, it goes back to us as reps too. Like, what are we not doing that you need? Like, what are our gaps? And I think that's just more of you take the emotion out of it, but you have a partnership business conversation about, all right, where do we collectively have the gaps and how do we fill it? I think that's an important to be challenged on both sides. But to your point, you get in these meetings and sometimes people are afraid to say things on both sides. But if we're going to get better, you have to address it and you have to be able to talk about it, have a plan, and then follow through with it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Curtis mentioned being on that panel and, coming from the other side. I said some things on that panel that, manufacturers didn't necessarily care for because, again, I've been in the shoes of a manufacturer's rep. And the reality of that is that the manufacturer's rep world is a very tough thing because you're only as good as what you were yesterday. And it doesn't matter. There's no consideration for some of the other intangible things that happen. You have an employee that has a wife that has a health problem and they're going to be off the road for a while. It's those kinds of things that can ultimately impact both of our businesses. But you have to be understanding that those kind of things happen. And if you're just looking at numbers on a call sheet to say you've got to do so many calls, again, all of that stuff kind of goes out the window. And I appreciate everything that a manufacturer's rep does coming from where I came from. Very frankly, this is much easier on this side of the fence.
Where do you see it going? Do you find, you mentioned you're unique, right? Because you can see both perspectives. You've lived in both shoes. A lot of manufacturers and reps maybe don't have that perspective. Where do you see like manufacturers and reps going in the next 5 years? Are there positive trends? Like there's going to be more reps. There's, people are learning how to work together better. Is there things we need to do to help that interface, or
Yeah,
where do you see these going?
let me piggyback on that too. I guess we kind of talk about to Curtis's question about, hey, where do you think that things are going in your industry from manufacturers and reps? Talk about also the direct sales force versus a rep and the pros and cons, and why you have chosen to go with a rep model versus hiring direct folks.
This is a unique topic. And what I would say to you is, and I'm going to preface it by answering the second question first. And why did we choose to go down this road? And hopefully that'll parlay into the first question. So we chose to go down this road. I believe in the manufacturer's rep model coming from that world. I believe in that. And I believe in that because when a manufacturer's rep goes out, I use the Walmart Meyer mentality, depending if you're in the South or the North. And it's kind of that one-stop shop thing, right? I think everybody is so taxed with time, whether it's a maintenance manager, whether it's an engineer, everybody is so taxed with time. The reason that I chose to go down this road, it's a one call. So I've got manufacturers that can go in and converse about bearings, pulleys, idlers, conveyor belt, multiple products that touch a conveyor belt. So I want to make it as easy as possible for the reps that we have to be able to make less sales calls, but be more productive when they make those sales calls. We just want to give them a product that's going to fit their mix. So synergistically, we need to dial the synergistic part of this relationship in so that we're finding rep firms that are very synergistic. So I believe our industry, we're a lot of gray hair guys. Like a lot of industries, the age of the sales force is getting older and older. And I think the challenge that we're faced with in our industry, specifically in the conveyor belting business, is the number of people that are retiring out that have the technical expertise. And if you think about the trajectory of where automation has gone since I started in 1983, that has gone through the roof as far as the automation piece. So when you talk about automating, you're talking about eliminating headcount on the manufacturing end. However, you're adding another piece to that, which is who is going to service and who is going to take care of all the automation piece that now you've implemented into the industries. So you had 3 people on a conveyor or on a line that now you put a conveyor on, but now you've got this big long conveyor that you've got to now service. And so from our industry's perspective, I think it's becoming much tougher. If you talk to the people in our industry, they are struggling finding technical experts to be able to go into plants and talk intelligently about challenges, fixes, those kind of things. And a lot of the expertise is now gone. We're kind of starting over in our industry as far as how are we going to continue going down this path of being technical experts. So there's an organization called NIBA, which is the National Industrial Belting Association, and they do a very, very good job as far as educating. But as you know, the education piece in a classroom is one thing. What manufacturers reps bring is the in-house or in-plant expertise that we're really kind of looking for. So you're taking the classroom and the expertise on the in-plant and you're trying to blend those together. And that's why I believe the manufacturer's rep model works so well. It's something that, again, we're fairly new into that from a manufacturer's perspective, since we've only been in existence for about 18 months. But I will tell you that the reps that we've brought on that have zero technical expertise have been able to bring sales in because of their relationships. And because of those relationships, when you start adding the relationship piece to kind of the soup, it really works well, especially in what we're doing.
That's an interesting take for sure. No, it's like I said, it's always good to hear it from your perspective, because a lot of the things that we believe about the rep model, and you've hit on a lot of it on why the rep model can be a success. Once again, you got to hire the right reps, right? I mean, and there's got to be a matter of trust. And to your point, is like back to the beginning of this, is you got to trust them to hire the right people, to have the consistency and longevity with the people that they bring to the table that are servicing our collective customers. And that's why these call reports, I mean, you can do a call report, anybody can do a call report, but at the same time, there's got to be a level of trust that both sides are going to do what they say they're going to do.
Yep. And it's going to change, right? One month you may have 20 calls, but the next month you may only have 3. You can't put a number on that, right? Because those 3 calls could be absolutely phenomenal calls that generate how much revenue. In my opinion, you just can't designate a number of sales calls to revenue, right? And a lot of people would argue with that, because I can make 3 sales calls and bring in X number of dollars in revenue, where the next guy is going to make 20 sales calls and bring in less revenue.
I agree with you. I mean, if I look at all our sales guys, I mean, every week's different, but sometimes you're dealing with issues. Sometimes you're, helping out with a warranty claim. I mean, it's every week's different, but at the same time, we're also seeing more and more of the manufacturers that we deal with that are asking for this data. So how do we, and that's kind of how we got to where we are with Flow, our software platform that we've created. How do we get them what they need without causing a lot of busy work for our sales guys? So that's the part that we're trying to figure out, is that the folks that maybe have a different perspective, how do we give them what they need without us just really just coming up with something or causing a bunch of extra work where it's not meaningful. So we're tackling that issue with flow, and we hope to have something that'll kind of answer everybody's questions and make it easy on everybody. So it's a challenge when you've got different manufacturers that want different things.
To your point there, what do you look for when you're bringing on reps? You mentioned in your panel at PTRA, you really like reps that challenge what you're doing, right? And are willing to step out there and say, hey, maybe we should do this, or maybe we should do that. In the ideal world, what do you look for in a rep? And, what would you, when you're bringing reps on?
So again, it's, for us, I'd love to say that we're friends with every rep firm that we have, and we're friends with many of them, because I believe that if you're friends, you can have tougher conversations without feeling like you're going to get let go or there's going to be a ramification to something. And as a manufacturer, I think we need to preach and let people understand that we truly want feedback, and that feedback can only make us better. And again, we don't call them Kaizens, but having our reps come in and look at our facility and give us suggestions and, make them a part of the team, right? Make them part of the family. And I think that's a critical aspect in moving forward with reps, is to make them a part of the family. So many manufacturers reps, when you talk to them, they'll tell you, we just don't feel a part of the team. We're alienated. We're not given the information that we require. They expect kind of the information to flow one way, but it doesn't come back, and those kind of scenarios. And I think that's what we're looking for, is we're looking for those open conversations and open dialogue to try to make all of us better.
Got it. And does that usually take, let's say you're bringing on a new rep firm or whatever, do you usually take, how long before like, oh yeah, like we've worked with them long enough, they're good, or how fast can you tell?
So again, I come at it from a unique perspective. I actually sat on the PTRA board prior to doing this, and I actually had to resign from the PTRA board in order to become a manufacturer. So I have been around PTRA, and I think the organizations that are out there, whether it's a plumbing organization, electrical organization, I think all of those organizations can play a extremely important role from a manufacturer's perspective. So like for us, we went last year as a manufacturer to PTRA, and part of what I did is I did not want to interview anyone. I talked to people, I had conversations, but again, I had relationships with a lot of these guys. So we were in a unique position. I think the problem that you run into is that there's a lot of organizations that go to the conferences and they go one time because they need to hire reps, and then they don't come back. And that's the problem. If you're going to go down this road of this model, and I think as manufacturers that who believe in the rep model, we need to be much more vocal as much as we possibly can in getting people to understand this isn't, you do it one time and you're kind of done and over with. You have to develop relationships. And just from my perspective, again, I have friends that I've become friends with over the years through PTRA, and a lot of them want to rep our product. And I'm going to have difficult conversations with some of my friends to say, no, we're going to go in this direction versus this direction. But those aren't going to be emails. Those are going to be conversations that, we believe from a business perspective that this is a better fit for us. But I think that people who want to use this model have to get active within every organization that's out there. If you're in the electrical, you get active in the electrical piece. And PTRA has the marketing committees and the different committees, and manufacturers have to be involved in those. They have to get active in those to understand, if I'm sitting in a committee and there's 10 different rep firms that are around that table, you're going to understand the ones that are going to be who you want to partner with. So I think part of that is the interaction that all manufacturers should have within the organizations that are out there. And if they're not taking advantage of those, I think they're doing a disservice on both sides, right? I think manufacturers reps need to be in there, and I think they need to be part of that. And I also think if you're a manufacturer's rep, you don't show up to these events just when you need lines. If you're a manufacturer, you don't show up to them just because you need reps. That's not a way to develop a relationship. So I think in our case, we have relationships with a lot of the people that we know we want to do business with. And we're in a pretty good, unique position because we're kind of able to pick and choose the ones that I feel kind of fit our culture the best.
Yeah. I think that's an important piece. It is a culture fit, whether I'm hiring somebody for for my company or we're negotiating or talking to a manufacturer, there's got to be that fit from a culture standpoint.
Mhm.
Because there's been times that we've had relationships where we've had a successful relationship financially with a manufacturer, but it was adversarial. It's like we're just not fitting here. And at the end of the day, even though they're getting orders and we're making commissions, nobody was really happy. That's not good for a long-term true partnership. So culture is a big part of it. I think you hit the nail on the head.
And I like what you're saying about the long game, right? You're showing up to these meetings long before we got to have more reps, right? You're kind of cultivating, farming, you can grow in the crops before you need to harvest, right? So we're coming up on time. Maybe just one last question. And that would be, since you mentioned PTR and things, like if you're maybe a new manufacturer, you're thinking about using reps for your business and you're going to the PTRA, maybe let's say PTRA for the first time, how do you recommend they manage the event, right? What's the best thing they could do?
So I know when I first went, you do the first timers. We have manufacturers councils. There's rep councils. There's manufacturers councils, and you get active. You're going to get what you put into it, right? And as a first timer, and obviously there's introverts, there's extroverts, and so introverted people have a little bit tougher time on trying to navigate some of that. But you have to step out of if you want to have a successful business, you have to step out of that introverted comfort zone and say, I'm going to get active with this. I'm going to understand kind of what this is. And I will tell you just from personal experience, both from a rep side and a manufacturer side, the organizations will completely change your business. And it changed our rep business when we first joined. We soloed for the first 6 years. And then when we joined PTRA, our rep firm blew up. So it helped that. And now as a manufacturer, the relationships that I've been able to gain through both sides of this fence, I feel like, being active in PTRA or any of the other organizations is just something that I'm very passionate about, because I believe that you have to understand, if you're going to go to the direct model, then you do what you do to do the direct model. But if you're going to go down the road of being a manufacturer's rep, and that's what you want to do, you have to get active in these organizations to be able to tie yourself to organizations that believe and fit the way that your manufacturing business believes and fits. And the only way that you can do that is by kind of stepping out of that comfort zone and getting on the panels, getting on the boards and all of those things to be able to kind of help that. So.
Well, that's great. Thank you, RJ. These are great insights. I think a lot of folks listening to this, if they're looking at the rep model, you've given them a lot of stuff to think about and to act on. So we really appreciate your time and your insights. You've been doing this for a long time, and so we appreciate your perspectives.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity.